almost perfect record, mentor and help other offenders. Even when he had no reason to believe that he would ever walk out of prison, he was helping prepare people for reentry. He became an elder in the cognitive community at his facility. And he had so many letters from correctional employees about what an incredible person he was. I've never seen anything like it. We couldn't get them all into the packet because there were so many of them. And so many of the people that he was incarcerated with also thanked him for his leadership and mentorship throughout their time while he was there. He did a lot to make the prison a safer place for everyone. So I just thought it would be really nice for you all to hear from him about what it was that helped him survive all these years and thrive, and also how you found Kira, the love of your life. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As she said, my name is Azeem Majeed. I want to give one brief clarification before I start. And the clarification is as it relates to what Mrs. McConnell said about the reason why I'm here. It's part of the reason. It's part of the reason. I was so elated yesterday when I heard that Henry Montgomery was finally granted parole. I literally had tears in my eyes, and I called my wife, and she was sitting down having, lunch with one of her close friends, and I called her and let her know. I asked her, "Did you hear the news?" I was just so elated because he's part of the reason. But the clarification that I want to give today is, as it relates to the reason why I'm here, is because of some of the most selfless and brilliant legal minds that the American criminal justice system has ever seen. And those minds belong to Professor Julie McConnell, Gerald Hess, Caitlin Harbour, and Emily Munn. I really want to drive this point home before I go forward, speaking about some of the things that I wanted to articulate today. It's hard for me to talk about these individuals without becoming overwhelmed with emotion. I literally love my legal team. So I just want to say that what she done, what she said, when she stood up here is one of the reasons why I'm here today. They were able to come together. It wasn't any pride. The ultimate goal, each and every one of them was focusing on the ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal was to make sure that I get a second chance to be out here in society with my family. They didn't care about who crossed the finish line first. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about fortune. They did this on a pro bono initiative. So, sacrificing their time, their money, their comfort, all of this to make sure that I have a second chance. So I want to say here today, Gerald Hess, Ms. McConnell, and Caitlin Harbour, she is not here, Emily Munn, I really appreciate you all, and I love y'all. As Ms. McConnell said, yes, my mother, she is an extraordinary woman. I love her. My mother is my pride, my joy, she's my love, she's my heart, she's my strength. I had a very difficult childhood. I have 13 siblings in total. 7 of us grew up in the same household by my mother. My mother was able to raise 7 children on her own. And we have never been separated. We all grew up in the same house. So I know you all can imagine how difficult it is for a single mother, a young mother, to raise 7 kids and keep them together. 3 boys and 4 girls. She did the best that she could to raise us. But unfortunately, as you know, somehow, my attention, became diverted from the things that it was supposed to be focused on, and, I became socialized by my environment out in the streets. I became socialized by that environment, and that innocent nature that I was created with, it became tainted. This is the truth. And I started learning behaviors that I wasn't created with. I started learning behaviors like drinking alcohol and selling drugs and violence. It's something that they said in this movie that I thought was very extraordinary, because I talked to my wife about this. One of my biggest problems when I was younger was I was unable to articulate the way that I was feeling. I was unable to put labels on the emotions that I was experiencing. And as a consequence of that, I became frustrated. I didn't even know how to place the label frustrated on frustration. And as a consequence of that, what I would do, I would act out. And I had a problem with anger. I became angry just at the mere fact that I couldn't articulate myself. When I felt like someone was taking me for granted. When I felt like someone was doing me wrong. And it's not right, as he said, this is not an excuse, this is an explanation. So as a consequence of that, this was my biggest demon, for lack of a better expression. My biggest demon was anger. As a youth, I was charged with capital murder. I was charged with robbery, malicious wounding, several offenses. And if I can be completely honest, the murder that I'm convicted of committing, to this day I have no recollection of it. This is the reality. To this day I have no recollection of it. But I do know that the environment that I was in, the people that I was surrounded by, out in the streets, what's the type of environment and the type of people that wasn't conducive to my growth and development, wasn't the type of people that would aid and assist me in, being led away from prison. And what I mean by that is, the type of actions that I was engaging in was the type of actions that the only consequence could be prison or in the grave. This is the reality. So fast forward, there's so much that I could tell you about my life and my story, but I'm trying to respect you all's time. But I was charged with capital murder at this particular time. In the Virginia specifically, and in the U.S., it was lawful to impose a death sentence on a juvenile offender. So when I came through the Norfolk City Jail, I was on trial for death. This was a traumatic experience from several different angles. For one, I didn't understand why I was incarcerated, meaning I understood the charges, but I didn't remember them. This is the first thing. And I didn't want to accept the fact that I was the type of individual that could commit such a brutal crime. Fast forward, and then we're going to be rewind. I never felt comfortable with talking about my crimes until I met these great and wonderful individuals that I told you about. They did more than represent me, but they helped me become a better version of myself. Gerald Hess, Julie McConnell, Caitlin Harbour, and Emily Munn. Throughout my incarceration, I spent my incarceration evolving into a better version of myself and helping people and listening to everyone else's problems, but I never felt comfortable talking about my childhood and my upbringing and my crime. But these individuals started that process by being true to me, listening to me, not judging me, and getting to know me for me. This is the type of attorneys that they are. But now allow me to rewind. The second reason that this was a traumatic experience, the third reason, I believe I'm on the third, is that, excuse me, I know I fast forwarded and then rewind. So it's because it was someone in the courtroom going through this experience with me that I love more than I love myself. And this was my mother. Even thinking about this to this day, I just feel so guilty. And it's so try to imagine Your mother is sitting there feeling helpless. When I know that she did every single thing that she could do for me to make sure that I had the best life possible within her means. And I put her in this situation and circumstance where she had to plead for her life. And what I mean that, I'm talking about her son. She loved me to life. She had to plead for my life. Now I'm fighting for my life. And the state is trying to sentence me to death. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I wasn't understood. I felt like I know I didn't receive the proper legal representation. This is the reality. And this is not speaking bad on anyone that represented me back then, but the reality is that the system it wasn't designed to like represent such a juvenile offender that's charged with such, heinous crimes, but such a capital offense. Not only a capital offense, even a lesser included offense. But the reality is this: we didn't have the resources. So, but if I had people like these great individuals that I just mentioned, at that particular age, I know for a fact I would not have ended up in the situation that I would have ended up in. Now let me say this, and I want y'all to hear me clear. There's a principle that I live by, and I'm not getting religious. It's a Quranic ayah, a Quranic statement that goes, it may be that you dislike that which is good for you and you love that which is bad for you. The reality is that the best thing that could have happened to me is what happened to me, even though it was the worst. Really understand what I'm saying. The best thing that could have happened to me is what happened to me, even though it was the worst. It may be that you dislike a thing which is good for you and you love a thing which is bad for you. I dislike the fact that I was on trial facing death. I dislike the fact that I was incarcerated. I dislike the fact that I didn't even understand while I was incarcerated. But at that point, it was good for me. And let me fast forward again. 20-something years later, when the United States Supreme Court issued their landmark ruling in Miller versus Alabama, in which they declared that it was unconstitutional to impose mandatory life sentences, life without parole sentences on juvenile offenders, those who were under the age of 18. That decision only, at that time, applied to 16 juvenile offenders in Virginia. There was approximately 2,500 juvenile offenders who were serving life without parole sentences in the United States. But in Virginia, there were only 16, more than 16 who had life without parole sentences in Virginia, but only 16 who had what the court deemed as mandatory life without parole. So the fact that the worst thing happened to me, meaning I was charged with a capital offense, and I received a mandatory life without parole sentence as a consequence of that capital offense, I became eligible for a new resentencing. It may be that you dislike that which is good for you and you love that which is bad for you. 16. Now, out of that 16, my brilliant legal team, Caitlin Harbour, Gerald Hess, Judy McConnell, filed a habeas corpus. Not only did they file a habeas corpus, they went straight to the federal court. And when I tell you a brilliant legal team, but I'm telling you the way that they look at law, that the strategies that they use is so brilliant, like, I knew that I was in good hands. I knew it. We ended up filing a habeas corpus in the United States District, well, actually we filed a motion for authorization to file a second or successive habeas corpus in the United States District Court, and that motion was granted. Then we filed a habeas corpus in the United States District Court, and long story short, we ended up winning. But at this particular time, the federal courts in Virginia held that mandatory life without parole in Virginia was not a sentence, meaning they argued that the judge had the ability to suspend the sentence, pursuant to a Virginia Statutory Code 19.2-303, which gives the circuit court judge the authority to suspend the sentence. But at this particular point, as my legal team argued that never before have a Virginia court suspended a life without parole sentence for a capital offense. If you read the statute, it says death or life. But my brilliant legal team, again, was able to convince Mrs. Arinda Wright Allen of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia to agree with their argument, and she granted my habeas corpus. This was the only federal court judge, right, in Virginia that issued such a decision. This was prior to Montgomery versus Louisiana. So I just want to put things in a proper perspective and give the people their proper rights. Prior to Montgomery,
gets all the credit for that.
yes. Prior to Montgomery, they were able to convince a federal court judge to grant my habeas corpus in order of a resentencing hearing. So we have to put the things in a proper perspective. But as I said, that's another example of how selfless they are. They said the reason why I was here was because of Henry Montgomery, and that is not true. But they're selfless. So the next thing that I want to say, so we won the habeas corpus. It was a battle. We ended up going to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. The state appealed that decision to the United States Fourth Circuit. And eventually it was just a long, tedious process. You know, it was a brutal wait. And eventually the state, stepped in and said, okay, we're gonna, file a motion to, we want to, withdraw the motion. We had the victory. Gerald has called me. I remember I was at King Mountain Correctional Center. And he said, Azeem, every time you say that, I know there's some news coming behind that. He would say, Azeem, and I know it's something that's weighty coming behind it. And he said, he wanted to talk to me. Selfless, listen, when I say selfless, instead of just saying yes, he wanted to make sure that it was okay with me before he even accepted that offer. They always think about what's best for me, but if what's best for me is not what I deem what's best for me, then they sit down and talk to me about it. This is the type of relationship that we have. It may be that you dislike that which is good for you and you love that which is bad for you, right? I would have loved for Jay to just say, yes, absolutely, withdraw it now, right? But it was best for me because it helped create that trust. All this was the preparation process for me to even be able to go into this Norfolk Circuit Court at my resentencing hearing and talk about my experience. Every single interaction with the client should build trust. This is something that I was deprived of as a youth. So I still suffered from those same traumatic experiences, even though I evolved into a better version of myself 20-something years later. And they understood this when I didn't. So we won the habeas corpus. We get back down for a resentencing hearing. So Gerald has this represent me at this particular time, and they say, listen, Azeem, now we back down in Virginia, and this is, I'm normally, handling federal cases and so on and so forth. He just telling me, he said, we need someone down here in Virginia that got this experience, selfless attorney. He reached out to me, he said, Judy McConnell. This is the perfect person.
Yeah.
Huh? What you
The
say?
students were amazing, right?
Absolutely, the students, absolutely. We're gonna get to that, the students. The students, this relationship that I'm talking about, the students came along with the territory. The students stayed visiting me monthly, several visits, creating these same healthy relationships. But the point that I'm making is, when we got to this particular point, Gerald has said, listen, we need her on the team. She came on the team. Eventually we got Emily One on the team. So let me fast forward. I know the story is kind of lengthy. There's so much that happened, that would, got me to this particular point. But as I said, it may be that you dislike that which is good for you and you love that which is bad for you. I wanted it to happen fast. Gerald has told me, no, let's take our time. We need to prepare. If I would have went back immediately as I wanted to, I don't think I would be here right now. So I wasn't used to being patient as a child, and I'm learning this. And throughout this process, I'm even becoming more resilient. See, because I'm the type of individual, when I have the tunnel vision, When I focus on something, I don't divert my attention. And sometimes you need people along the way that's gonna help you, like, even slow down and look in other directions to see other things that you need to get in your path that's gonna help you get to the particular goal that you're trying to accomplish. Guideposts. So, we went back to the resentencing hearing. It was an amazing experience. There's so much that I could tell you about that. You know, we had my whole legal team there, my family was there. We put on an impressive argument, an impressive case. Julie McConnell, she helped me prepare my allocution. She's a tough teacher. So it was wonderful, and she helped me, and it was so brilliant, you know, as a consequence of the help and, you know, and assistance that she gave me in helping me articulate my story to the court. So we done that, and, you know, Judge Mary Jane Hall was an extraordinary judge. She was very intelligent, you know, very compassionate. At the end of the resentencing hearing, she imposed a sentence upon me that, you know, was guaranteed that I would be released. She gave me a 25-year sentence for capital murder, which originally was a life sentence, which was suspended to 25 years. A 25 years for capital murder, which was ran concurrent with a 20-year sentence for malicious wounding. Also, it was ran concurrent with a 10-year sentence that she imposed for robbery. I also had a previous 8-year sentence for robbery that was suspended, and a 12-month sentence for assault and battery, which was consecutive. So much has happened. You know, I felt so elated, and I felt tired when I received my new sentence. You know, I felt so tired, and I felt tired because I've been resilient throughout this entire process, you know, of traveling, you know, through my incarceration, fighting for freedom. And, you know, I had so much weight on me, but I learned to live in a situation in which, you know, being like under pressure was normal to me, as he said in there. I did not know how to live in a state in which I was not under pressure, when I wasn't fighting. I didn't know how to live without fighting. I fought for so long. So when I received my new sentence, I was exhausted. And I remember reaching out to my legal team and telling my family I was so happy, but I was so exhausted. It was like, now I don't have to like really fight for my freedom. It's gonna happen, I know it's gonna happen. And you know, it was kind of like being in the military. You know, if a person is in the military and they're in war, and when they come out, they gotta go through this decompression stage. That's what I was going through, I was decompressing. So I was so elated. I had my freedom. I have an opportunity to, you know, to obtain my freedom. So after this, I eventually went, you know, into the cognitive community. I was able to get a job in the cognitive community serving as an elder. Now this, you know, watching this particular documentary about resilience, it reminded me so much of this, you know, my, you know, journey throughout the cognitive community. When we're talking about cognitive restructuring, you know, paying attention to the way that we think, you know, adopting, understanding like certain, you know, traumatic experiences that have taken place in our life, putting labels on our emotions, learning new ways to deal with new, you know, old problems and new problems. The people that's in our life, the way that they deal with us, like not telling them what they think, but teaching them how to think. All these type of things is, you know, is some of the things that I learned in the cognitive community. Throughout my incarceration, I became Muslim, as Professor McConnell said. I became the imam in the Department of Corrections at every prison I've been for the last 20-something years. So I was in a position where I was mentoring people and educating people and advising people, you know, and I was reformed before I entered the cognitive community. However, when I entered into the cognitive community, I didn't realize until that particular point when I realized that I still had work to do. I still had work to do. Now I needed to learn these cognitive restructuring skills and these pro-social skills and these problem-solving skills, these things that's gonna aid and assist me in my journey out here in society, and trust me, it works. So, I highlight that particular point because I was deprived of these programs when I entered the Virginia Department of Corrections. Because of the sentence that I had, I wasn't allowed to participate in various different educational programs and various different, you know, treatment programs. I wasn't. The education that I received, I had to become self-educated or pay for it myself. But I know that, let me back up for a minute. Remember I told you that the best thing that could have happened to me was the worst thing? I'm not saying that I should not have never come to prison. I should have never come to prison. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, what we're saying is that the sentence that was imposed upon me, a sentence that took away the hope, it was unjust. So to sentence me as if I was permanently incorrigible was very unjust. And it just compounded the trauma that I was experiencing. But fortunately, I had the type of resilience that I will continue to push through and continue to, evolve into a better version of myself. Nothing changes if nothing changes. See, giving a person that particular sentence is saying there's no hope, they can't be redeemed, they can't be reformed, they can't be rehabilitated. But listen, it also can lead to them not changing. So now, when I told you earlier, when I say that these relationships that we have with people, what they tell us, something that the people told me when I was younger, people told me all of my life, they would tell me if I try to change and become a better version of myself, they would say, you changing up. Why are you changing? They made it as if change was something that was like, diabolic. And this is what we hear. We hear it from the children, we hear it from the adults that's in our lives. This is what we hear. And this is what we hear when we receive that type of sentence. Don't change. This is what that sentence says. What you've done, you're defined by that for the rest of your life. There's no need to change because there's no hope. We don't have hope in you, you shouldn't have hope in yourself. Don't change. So I was expressing to my nephew the other night, I was talking about this very topic when it comes to change. Change is a general term. It is a general term. But then you got two specific types of change. You got what you call evolution, and you got what you call de-evolution or devolution. One is when you become a better version of yourself, and the other is when you become a worse version of yourself. Right? So when we say don't change, what we're doing, we're telling the people to stay at the level that you are, right? And continue to dwindle and become a worse version of yourself. Because you're going to change regardless. It's inevitable. I don't care who you are. So, but it's the wise people are those who make deliberate change. And this is a process, and it takes information. It takes people in our lives who are trauma-informed, not telling us that we are wrong, right? But understand, it's not about what's wrong with us, but about what happened to us. And a lot of us, we don't understand what happened to us because we don't think about it. So we have to have the type of arenas where we can talk about it. And as I said, I'm speaking about myself too. As I told you, I wouldn't even talk about it until I met these individuals. Trauma-informed. So I was processing it. They helped me process it. So as I said, throughout my journey throughout the Majeed Popular Corrections, Islam is really what gave me what I needed to, start evolving into a better version of myself. And, and when I entered into the community, this was the finalization of that particular process of evolution. And I'm still evolving. I reached a point where I felt that I couldn't evolve anymore in the Majeed Popular Corrections. Now all of the skills that I've learned, I needed to learn them out here. I needed to put them to use out here in society. It's kind of like if you put a tree inside in this room right here and you let it grow and eventually it's going to reach the top. It has nowhere else to go, but it's just going to grow down. You got to put it outside so it can continue to grow and evolve. And this is how it is for me, and I'm still going through this evolutionary process, and I'm so grateful that I've been given the opportunity to continue to evolve into a better version of myself. And to continue to effect positive change. But there's one more thing, that I want to talk about. I got to the point where when the Virginia Department of Corrections started recalculating my sentence, they miscalculated. And they didn't give me the good time that I would have been earning over the last 20-something years, right? And I say 20-something years because I was incarcerated for a total of 26 years. But at this time, it was around 22, when I got resentenced, around 22 years. So again, my legal team filed a motion in the Norfolk Circuit Court, specifically in a nutshell, arguing that the failure of the DOC to give me the good time that I would have been earning over the last 20-something years, had I not been serving two unconstitutional life without parole sentences, is pretty much tantamount to me still being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. Meaning that when I was resentenced, when the court held that, well, before I was resentenced, when the federal court held that my life without parole sentences were unconstitutional and violated the 8th Amendment, then when those unconstitutional sentences were removed, any collateral consequences that attaches to those two unconstitutional sentences were supposed to be removed too. So you can't say this life without parole sentence is unconstitutional, but yet we're gonna remove it and give you a new numerical sentence, yet we're not gonna give you good time because you had unconstitutional life without parole sentences. It doesn't make sense. So if that's the case, I'm still being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. So my team filed the motion in the Norfolk Circuit Court and won again. So the DOC gave me 17 months worth of good time, but didn't give me all of my good time. So we continued to push forward, engage in negotiations with the Attorney General's office, with the DOC, and it was a process, and we were being patient. But throughout this process, Governor Northam signed into law HB 35, which is a bill that allows juvenile offenders to be eligible for parole after serving 20 years of their sentence. So at that point, I've been incarcerated 24 years, I believe, at that particular time. So I was incarcerated that made me immediately eligible for parole. So my team again filed an impressive parole application with the Virginia Parole Board. I went up for parole and made first parole. This is the journey. And made first parole. So I'm here before you. First and foremost, I give praise to Allah, to God. Because I would not even have had a resilient spirit or the ability to even survive in prison. I came out of prison untouched. I've never been stabbed. I have my mind. I still have all of my limbs. It's only by the grace of God that that I accomplished that. I left out of there with my respect, my dignity, right? I went in as a child, sentenced as a man when I wasn't a man. And forced to behave as if I was a man when I wasn't. I was incapable of being a man because I wasn't a man. I seen so many individuals go in like me. They got raped, they got stabbed, they got killed, they hung themselves. I've seen it. And I'm so fortunate. But there's so many other individuals like me in there. And this is why we need individuals like you. The Children's Defense Clinic. When I tell you, you all are the greatest clinic ever, the greatest students ever. Like this same mentality, this same level of care. Professor McConnell imparted it upon you all. That's how you all dealt with me. The greatest legal researchers. Because these attorneys, great attorneys, don't have the time to do every single thing. You need a team. As I told you, it was a team that got me here. It wasn't one person, it was a team. And you all were part of the team. So, this is my story. There's so much that I can say, there's so much that I want to say, and so much that I'm not going to say. But I just want to say, before I conclude, that I love you all. Thank you all for, sacrificing yourselves and sacrificing your time and your energy. And I know that it was a struggle. My attorneys are resilient. I know that it was a struggle. But it was a battle.
You worked as hard.
Yeah. I know I'm a problem sometimes too, in terms of,
We
But
love
they-
every minute of it.
Yes, ma'am.
We do have just a couple minutes, should we see if anybody has a question?
Yes, ma'am. Do
Thank
anybody
you
have
so
any
much.
questions?
I would like to hear how your life has been since you have been released. Are you working? What are you doing? How are you feeling?
Yes. Right now, immediately when I got released, I started doing landscaping. So that's what I've been doing since I've been out. I've been actually applying for several different jobs, trying to secure more stable employment. However, I have been bringing in income. I've been saving, my money, and I've been doing great. So I haven't wanted for anything. I don't want for anything. I've been blessed. I was able to, as you know, this is my beautiful wife right here. My amazing wife. And I love this woman dearly. She's been by my side, like supporting me. 100%. 100%. I've got out, I have my ID, things that I've never accomplished, before I went in. I have my, learner's permit. I will have my license on the 8th. I purchased my car. I just started my business, my company, 2 weeks ago. Azeem, Majeed, LLC, doing business as Azeem, Majeed Inspires. We're currently searching for a home, me and my wife. I've done a lot.
You voted?
Yeah.
You
Ma'am?
voted? Yes, you voted.
Oh, yes, I voted.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I voted for the first time in my life. That was an empowering experience.
Yeah.
Like seriously, that was very empowering. So what else?
He's had several speaking engagements.
Yes, every community event that I could go to, I go to. And, I